Um, Hello, everyone. It is such a great honor to have you all today and to have our distinguished speaker, Dr. Julius Marcus Garvey. It's a great honor to virtually meet you, sir. And we're really looking forward to hearing about what you have to say about Africa and African development. And I can speak because I'm currently in Africa, in Egypt, and I'm also part of the African diaspora since I was born and raised in the United States. So I know very well how important it is as being part of the African diaspora to reconnect with Africa, our continent. So it's again, great honor and pleasure to meet you. So today, Dr. Julius Garvey, he joins us today. Dr. Garvey is a surgeon, a medical professor. He was born August 16 in Kingston, Jamaica, fellow Leo, to the United, excuse me. Yes, and his father, Marcus Garvey, well known, of course, activist and icon. So he grew up, obviously, in a very amazing environment and with such an incredible role model. His mother, of course, Amy Jacques Garvey. The younger of two sons, Dr. Garvey was raised in Jamaica, graduated from Warmers Trust High School for Boys in Kingston in 1950, and then earned his BS degree from McGill University in Montreal, Canada in 1957. He got his medical degree, CM degree from McGill University, Faculty of Medicine in 1961. Dr. Garvey began his medical career by interning at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal in 1961. And in 1962, he began his first residency in surgery at the Mount Sinai Hospital of New York, which is quite impressive. Completing his residency in 1965, Dr. Garvey also completed residencies in surgery at the Harlem Hospital Center in 1968 and in thoracic and cardiovascular surgery at the University of Maryland Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland in 1970. Dr. Garvey became an instructor in surgery at the Columbia University College of Physicians and Surgeons in 1971. The following year, he joined the Albert Einstein College of Medicine as an instructor in surgery, later becoming an assistant professor of surgery. While teaching at Columbia University and the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, Dr. Garvey also served as an attending surgeon in cardiothoracic surgery at the Harlem Hospital Center and Montefiore Hospital, as well as associate attending and head of thoracic surgery at the Montefiore Mauritania affiliate. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing correctly. In 1974, Dr. Garvey was named attending in charge of thoracic surgery at Queen's Hospital Center. In addition to serving as an attending surgeon in thoracic and cardiovascular surgery at the Long Island Jewish Medical Center, Dr. Garvey became the Long Island Jewish Medical Center's acting program director for the Division of Cardiovascular Surgery from 1980 to 1982, and assistant professor of surgery of State University of New York at Stony Brook from 1978 to 1988. Dr. Garvey also started his own private practice in 1983 and also served as chief of thoracic and vascular surgery at Queen's Hospital Center from 1993 to 2006, as well as chief of vascular and thoracic surgery at Wyckoff Heights Medical Center from 2000 to 2004. In addition to, quite impressive, his other medical appointments, Dr. Garvey served as an attending surgeon of North Shore University Hospital, Franklin General Hospital, Massapequa General Hospital, Catholic Medical Centers, and Little Neck Community Hospital. Dr. Garvey is a certified fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons, the American College of Surgeons, the International College of Surgeons, and the American College of Chest Physicians, as well as a diplomat of the Board of Cardiothoracic and Vascular Surgery. the American Board of Surgery, the American Academy of Wound Management, and the American College of Phlebotomy. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Garvey. We are so honored to have you and so impressed by your background. It is such a great honor to see such an amazing African with such incredible accomplishments from the diaspora, and it's such a great honor to have you, sir. With the honorable, like to give the welcome speech. Maybe we can start with that.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. While waiting for Dr. Garvey, let me just read through my speech and then we'll wait for him. Thank you very much. It was Marcus Josiah Garvey of blessed memory that said, and I quote, "Never forget that intelligence rules the world and ignorance carries the burden. Therefore, remove yourself as far as possible from ignorance and seek as far as possible to be intelligent." Fellow Africans, I stand before you today with a message of hope. Now is the time for every African, irrespective of your color, language, tribe, religion, and political affiliation, to rise up and make Africa work. Nobody can tell our story the way we will say it. Let us come together to salvage our dear continent that is envy of others. First of all, be proud of your heritage and cherish your African identity. You need to constantly remind yourself that African way of life is beautiful. We are blessed with beautiful culture, glittering from the most enviable continent of the world. Our beautiful culture can be found in the quality of our indigenous food, our music, dance, fashion, entertainment, and others. Therefore, Africans must begin to see themselves as the most blessed people on the planet Earth. Imbibe and promote our great culture, which is so unique. Hence, the idea of African Youth Leadership and Culture Summit, AYLCUS 2024, which is slated for 21st to 25th May 2024 in Nigeria. The whole idea of African Youth Leadership and Culture Summit is to make unity as pinnacle of our sustainability. There's no other better time than this for Africans to unite. Let us unite to move our dear continent forward with better understanding that we're one Africans with common destiny. Africa is our only home. We got to do everything best to make it the best place for our children. Africans should decolonize their mindset and begin to accept Africa's current challenges as opportunity to transform the continent for future generations. However, the road to the promised land may not be that smooth. There's definitely going to be a whole lot of distractions. In spite of these challenges, we Africans should not allow ourselves to be manipulated by any of these circumstances. Let's take a journey together from Zanzibar to Lesotho, from Gusau to Ashanti land of Ghana, from Soweto to the land of Pharaoh in Egypt. To Africans in diaspora, you must see through the cloud. It is time to go back to your roots and realize the real beauty of Africa. For we all have a collective responsibility to ensure that the African pride, which our forefathers bequeathed to us, is duly preserved for Africans yet unborn. On this special day, I challenge every African to be proud of Africa and to boldly show off their African pride. You must resist any attempt which seek to confuse your mind to feel inferior about your African identity. I welcome Dr. Garvey. Is one of our pride. is one of the people we are looking forward to in Africa. We welcome you, and we pray to God to give you good health and long life to salvage Africa and take the continent to the level we really want it to be. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Honorable. That was a great introduction. We appreciate that. We're very excited and looking forward to hearing from Dr. Garvey. And I think if I can just quickly just say something, reiterate what you've just said, Honorable, with regards to, as Africans, sharing one destiny and having common challenges, but having the responsibility to go back to our roots, to reflect on our African pride, and to realize how valuable our continent is and how rich it is, and to understand that we're blessed, and to be able to take that to the next level, to work together as one continent and as one Africa. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Honorable Dr. Julius Garvey. Sir, just ask if you can kindly unmute.
Please tap the unmute button. There's an unmute button on the app. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you. Sorry.
Honorables, if I may put someone on the spot until we again sort out the technical difficulty. We have here a dear friend of mine and also a colleague of Dr. Garvey. She's joined us, and if it's okay, if I can just invite her just to say a couple of words, and putting her on the spot, of course. But we have Dr. Amina Ali, and she is a perfect example of an African who has really risen to the highest levels, has shown great leadership, and someone who I am extremely proud to call my sister. So Dr. Amina, can I put you on the spot to just say a couple of words?
Yes, Nancy. Yes. Good morning. Good morning to everyone.
Hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay. So can we go ahead now?
Oh, absolutely, sir. I will always relent to you. Thank you, my Fulani brother. I am peaceful in this and understand that you, of course, take precedence. Nancy, I will come in after his speech. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your grace.
Okay, I apologize for the technical difficulties. Maybe on my side, I don't really know. I've just moved to Florida, and our internet connections are not, totally kosher, you might say. Anyway, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Nancy, and also for you. It's indeed a pleasure for me to be here and an honor. Now, you've given me an extremely important and wide topic: reawakening the psyche of Africans globally for African development. Thank you for that. It's of extreme importance, because I think the mindset is the problem in terms of Africa and Africans. We have been psychologically assaulted for more than 500 years. And our problem now is the result of that psychological onslaught of our minds. And my father said back in 1937 that we must liberate our minds from mental slavery, because while others may help us free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind. Of course, Brother Bob Marley, took that and made it part of his redemption song, which is something that my father always talked about, of course, and was forefront in his message, the redemption of Africa. So in order to redeem Africa, we have to change our minds. My father said that he had an original African mind, and we have to create that in our young people, our original African mind. Now, what does that mean? The mind that the European has, shall we say, conditioned us to have, is a mind that is based on materialism, believing that everything that is physical is what is real, and what is not physical is not real. If it can't be measured, if it can't be weighed, if it can't be seen, if it can't be felt, if it can't be heard, etc., then it's not real. In other words, the spiritual universe, which is really the largest part of the universe, is excluded in terms of the Western mindset. It's only what comes to the mind through the five senses, and then the intellect of the mind, so to speak, is what is valorized and thought to be what is most important. So the human being is thought of as a mind-body complex, a physical body and a mind that relates to the five senses. Now that gives you, certain philosophy, a certain ideology. For example, the thing that it does is that it creates individualism, because you have this body, and you think that's all that you are, is the body, the five senses, and the mind. So there's individualism, meaning that the individual is more important than the other, and there's a division, there's a duality in thinking. There's a division between self and other. There's a division between self and other human beings. There's a division between self and nature, and there's a division between self and God. That leads to all kinds of problems, which of course we see currently in the Western nations, where people have problems with their identity, where we see anxiety, depression, drug abuse, etc. We see the propensity for Europeans to go to war, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnamese War, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Syria, now the war in Ukraine, and war in Libya, and Yemen, and now we see the genocide in Gaza. So that's how Europeans solve problems. They claim they go to war to achieve peace, but that's ludicrous. You can only achieve peace by being peace yourself. Now let's just look a little bit at the African paradigm. And again, I'd like to quote my father. God and nature first made us what we are. God and nature first made us what we are. Then out of our own creative genius, we make ourselves what we want to be. Follow always, that great law, and let the sky and God be your limit, and eternity your measurement. Now that's a whole cosmology right there. Okay, there's a trinity, there's God, there's nature, and there's man. Man meaning, human species, man, woman. We're not being gender distinctive. So that's that, and that is one meaning, of course, that God created man, but he's not separate from man. God created nature, but God is not separate from nature, and we're not separate from nature. So we have our identity is in God, and God has his identity in us, and we are also connected to nature. So we are stewards of nature, and we are stewards of each other, because I see myself in the other. So there's no separation between self and other. That gives rise to the way in which we live, meaning that we live in family, we live in an extended family, we live in community, and we live in groups, in nation states, in tribes, etc., with that common identity. So we have a communal way of living, as opposed to simply the individual identity, which sets up one against the other, self against other. We see ourselves as in the other. We see the other in ourselves. Of course, that's manifested in the Bantu concept of Ubuntu. And that goes all the way back, of course, to the Nile Valley civilizations of Ethiopia, Kush, and Kemet, etc., with the concept of Ma'at. Ma'at means our unity, our harmony, our oneness, etc. So this is the African paradigm that we need to go back to. It is the basis of African humanism, because what this means is that we put human beings in the center, because the human being is sacred, because we're all made in the image of God. There's no separation between us and God. So we try to create communities. We end up creating the first, of course, civilizations in terms of people, being able to maximize their potential within society. That's what a civilization means, the humanization of man within society. And that's the gift that Africa, that's the life that Africa's lived. That's the gift that Africa has for the 21st century, the African paradigm of African humanism, as opposed to the Western concept of individualism, scientific materialism, which has given us the Industrial Revolution. It has significant benefits, but it's also destroying the planet, and it puts machines and technology first before human beings. So the technology is now leading us, as opposed to human beings leading the technology. So this brings us to the whole concept of sustainable development for African people within the 21st century. We have to recognize, in our societies, we have to create our societies, we have to recreate our civilization, so that it mirrors what we've just talked about, the spiritual aspect and the material aspect in balance, not one excluding the other. We can't move forward only from the spiritual perspective, where we sit on our cushions or go off into the forest and enjoy our spirituality. No, we are part spiritual, we are part material, and this has to be mirrored in the society that we develop. So we have to be able to use the technology of the Industrial Revolution, but we have to place it within the context of our humanity, and our humanity has to guide how we use the technology, not the other way around. And I think that's the crisis that we are in at the present time. It's a climate crisis. It's a crisis of the use of the materials of nature in terms of water, clean water, clean air. We're poisoning the air. We're poisoning the water with our garbage is poisoning the ocean. We're creating toxicity with the way in which farming is taking place in the West, with all of the fertilizers and the fungicides and the herbicides, et cetera, genetically modified foods and so on, so that the food has no nutritive value. So on and on and on. The West is in a crisis, and we cannot adopt the Western methods to get us out of the crisis. We cannot imitate the West. We must recreate our own civilization using the current technology efficiently, but for the purpose of maximizing human potential. I think I've said a little bit of a mouthful. Maybe you want to progress with another question, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garvey. That was so enlightening. And honestly, if you allow me as moderator to just reiterate some of the important points that you've made, which really it's so breathtaking, because you're talking about not mimicking or not, looking to the West that, as you mentioned, is in crisis, to look at in terms of how we develop our own civilization, but rather than reinventing our own, going back to our roots and seeing how, Africa has always been the source of civilization and the origin of civilization, and that we have the tools, we have the manpower, we have the youth, we have all the resources necessary in order to actually, have our own sustainable development. You also talked about very important points. I really was reflecting a lot on the use of the word humanity, because sometimes looking at the news, I feel like sometimes we've kind of lost our humanity in many ways, looking at what's happening, and exactly, you cannot reach peace through war. That's impossible. That's an oxymoron. So the fact that, this model of using force or using violence or war in order to, whether it's to promote democracy, a specific type of political ideology, or to, again, try to bring about peace, that's really impossible. And as well as looking at technology, how it can be very beneficial, but how also we have to be careful in how we use technology and where that fits in. When we look at Africa as a continent and we look at the sustainable development of our continent, we have to also see where, you know, industry comes in, where technology comes in with such a good balance that, again, like you said, does not pollute the environment, does not, you know, increase our carbon footprint, and then therefore also deplete our resources, of course. So I can't thank you enough. What you said is just amazing. I think it's so amazing also to look at, you know, how we can work together again as one Africa to really maximize our efforts to achieve sustainable development. And climate action is very important as well. So I'd like to, if you allow me, Doctor, I'd like to invite Dr. Amina just to say a couple of words, and then we'll definitely, I'm sure there's a lot of questions people would like to ask you, sir.
How can I come back after Dr. Garvey? How do you follow up with something like that? How do you,
well, I didn't want to follow you, so that was my choice.
Oh, wow, Dr. Garvey. You know, the last time I saw you was when we were being honored at the Schomburg here in New York. And yes. I remember us embracing, and I remember you saying to me, I'm so glad I had another Fula sister here. And it just really touched me. And it really allowed me to understand that my mission had purpose, and it shifted me a bit. I had retired since from medicine. And I too, I'm still in New York. I'm not down in Florida yet. You know, that's where we all go. But I am still wanting to embrace this as a social construct. So part of my retirement is going to be the re-energizing of the human intelligence. You know, we have artificial intelligence, we have emotional intelligence, but I really want to bring back the construct of human intelligence. And that's through gender and human rights understandings, and of course, what it is that we need to do. So one of the things that I wanted to say today is thank you. Thank you for that, that connection we had then. And it may not have meant much to you, but it really, it shot a bolt in me and led me to know that I had to begin to realign my assignment here on this earth and continue to pay my rent in service by doing things that are more service worthy rather than doing things that are service constructed, which is medicine. You know, you're doing it for a service, but you're getting something in return. And you mentioned that today about stop looking at it as the monetary thing. Start looking at it as a whole to heal humanity. And that really struck a chord with me. So that human intelligence is what I'm bringing forward. And I want to thank you so much for confirming it today. And thank you, Nancy, again. Good seeing you again. And thank you so very much for having me today.
Likewise, Doctor. I mean, it's such a great honor to also have you today, and to also like attest to Dr. Garvey's just how amazing he is and how much he really brings some pride to our community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ever, and I will follow him anywhere. So thank you for having me.
Good to see you, Dr. Amina.
Yes, good to see you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I am sure that everyone has tons of questions for Dr. Garvey, and maybe if you raise your hand, we can start that way, and then we can kind of, you know, try to answer everyone's questions. So who would like to start?
So I'll start. When are you coming back? Like, we need you. Like, we need
well,
you.
I just got back from Ethiopia yesterday, Friday. So I'm in jet lag. I don't know where I am, but I spent about 5 days in Addis, and I was at the Adwa Museum, which was absolutely you know, fabulous. It's a museum for the victory of the against the Ethiopians, you know, back in 1896. So it's very well represented, and I had a great time touring through the museum and speaking with different people at the African Union, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ethiopia, and try to lay the foundations for how we go forward, which is what we're discussing here this morning.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that update.
Okay, great. Okay, perfect. So we'd like to entertain more questions, but while everyone is preparing their questions, Dr. Garvey, if you'll allow me to ask, going back to the theme of what this talk is about, we're talking about really recognizing and, you know, with a great pride, all those men that really fought for not just the independence of the African continent, various African countries, but also the Caribbean. And we're also talking about the youth and the role of the youth to kind of take on that legacy. How are your thoughts in terms of, you know, how do we do that? How do we actually create similar icons like what we've seen in the past to also, you know, engage the youth to become also the leaders in the future of also, you know, not just now these men fought for our independence, you know, and everything, but how now to take it the next step and develop our continent.
Yeah, you're absolutely, you know, correct. We have had great leaders, great charismatic leaders who have fought for our independence. And since, of course, the 60s, all of our countries have been independent. The 54 countries in Africa, the 15 countries that make up CARICOM in terms of the Caribbean. So we're independent. What has not happened? And we have not been able to institutionalize our concepts of freedom and liberty. We are still being contaminated by the system that enslaved us and colonized us. And that's what we were talking about before. But we don't need to dwell on that now. We need to move forward. And we need to institutionalize who we are, so that when we do that, then we can train our young people at the universities, you know, in terms of skills training, you know, up and down the line, in terms of engineering, mathematics, the whole STEM, but of course it means not just STEM, but STEAM in that sense. But understanding also that, you know, 40% of the jobs out there do not need necessarily a degree. So you have to train that 40% and the skills, get them out of high school and train them in the skills. Not everybody needs to go through college or even a community college. And the sad thing at the present time is that we're not doing that. And this is what we have to do. At the present time, 100 million young Africans are not in school. That's a waste of our youth demographic. We talk about our youth demographic and say Africa is the youngest continent. We're going to do wonderful things because we're so young. You know, Europe is aging, even China is aging. The future belongs to us. But if we don't train our youngsters, there won't be a future. As you see, they're crossing the Sahara, they're drowning in the Mediterranean, people are abusing them elsewhere. So this is the shift that is needed right now. This is our crisis, to create the institutions that will train our young people for the future. Because as you know, the future belongs to the youth, but you can't have ignorant youth. They're going to have we're not going to be able to make a future that is desirable for themselves. So this is what we have to do. And that's part of my mission at the present time.
Yes, this is true. So Honorable Kenny is saying this is a good opportunity for participants to introduce themselves so that we may know each other better. If you allow, I'll start with myself just to give you guys also like you know, possible model on how to introduce ourselves. But my name is Nancy Abdelhadi. So I am an Egyptian and an American, but I say Egyptian first, even though I was born and raised in the US, because I feel that my heritage is more Egyptian than anything else. I grew up to two Egyptian parents. I was very much familiar from a very young age with Egyptian culture, even though we lived in the US. So we were kind of in a bubble. We traveled often to Egypt back and forth, and that was something great my parents did in terms of introducing us always to our continent and to our country. And as an adult, after getting my education, I have a master's degree in diplomacy and international relations. I chose to come back to Egypt, and I wanted to do something in terms of helping, you know, my country and the continent in terms of sustainable development and connecting Egypt with other African countries, because I feel that really we are not taking advantage of the opportunity, you know, with the free trade agreements, and also just, you know, opening our borders. And this is with great pride, I'm also executive board member of the African Tourism Board, and this is one of the, you know, goals that we have is promoting Africa as one destination, is opening the borders, you know, visa free for other Africans, you know, being able to travel freely and explore how amazing our continent is. And I tell you, once I introduce people to different African countries, like we've been to Uganda, we've been to Zambia, Egyptians come back and say, wow, when are we going again? This is incredible. They didn't realize how amazing, you know, these countries are and how amazing our continent is. Again, because we go by these preconceived misconceptions, you know, what we see in the media and things, and it's not always accurate. And the thing I just wanted to quickly say, one of the biggest things, obstacles, I think, what I see is like the conflicts. When you look at like what's going on in DRC, when you see what's going on in Sudan, when you see, I mean, when we talk about sustainable development, how do we overcome those conflicts that are really ripping away at our precious resources, you know, killing off so much of our populations? And how do we really, I mean, you obviously have to resolve that in order to talk about anything else, I believe. So, sorry, I took too long, but just had to say that.
That's a great, you know, a statement as such. You know, we have to recognize the magnitude of our problems, but we also have to recognize that nothing is insoluble. You see, Africa is the largest continent in the world. I think realistically, you know, Africa itself can contain Europe, the United States, China, Japan, and still have space left over. It has intricate geography, including the Sahara Desert, the Kalahari Desert, etc. You know, that are obstacles to movement, etc. It's been invaded over time, you know, by Arab nations from the east, by European nations from the north and the west, and from the south. So it has had all of these sort of negative effects in terms of making it one Africa, so that empires have been broken up, and they've been broken up into different nation states and different tribes. So what we have to do now is recreate that whole concept of Africa. So that when you wake up in the morning, you don't think that you're a Nigerian, you know, waking up in Lagos. You think you're an African waking up in Lagos, or you don't think that you know you're an Ethiopian waking up in Addis. You're an African waking up in Addis, or you're an African waking up in Cairo, etc. So it needs the African mindset, which has now, I think, to be recreated in that sense. And you know, the rest of the world looks at us as Africans, but we don't look at ourselves as Africans. We look at ourselves as Ugandans or Nigerians or Kenyans, etc., etc. That has to be overcome, because that is part of the problem that we have. We have to get to one or two, or at most three languages, so we can communicate with each other wherever we go. These are the things that have to be overcome in terms of us moving forward. But we can't just sit back and say these are problems. We have to actually work to solve those problems.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We have Felix Don Flexi is asking, how can we engage successful Africans in diaspora to invest in technologies that promote and advance African cultures, and coming back to invest in startups that can boost local economies? Felix Don Flexi is the summit manager at AYLCUS, Abuja, 2024.
That is absolutely necessary, because as you know, the diaspora has, you know, significant resources, both intellectual resources as well as physical resources, meaning they have institutional resources as well as monetary resources. The thing is, you know, number one, to make it accessible, and number two, to make it preferential. Again, we go back to mindset. And, you know, a lot of, you know, Africans, I think, still believe that if it's European or if it's American or whatever, it's better than what the diaspora can bring to the table. And they go there first. But if you look at, for example, remittances, very, you know, usually the remittances are more than the, you know, the aid, etc., that comes from Europe or America, because much of that aid is wrapped up in their own presence. I mean, you know, that they send their experts, etc., and pay them, and it's a minuscule part of that aid that actually benefits the country. And it's the same thing with the economic involvement of the usual, say, American and European countries. They come really to extract whatever they can extract, whether it's resources in the ground, so, you know, whether it's gold, platinum, cadmium, or coltan, or oil, or whatever it is. Take it out at the cheapest rate and pay no taxes if they can. It's an extractive process of the way in which they've developed capitalism. We I think, need to understand a different perspective in terms of capitalism. And we need to reach out to each other, shall we say, maximally, because, you know, the relationship is waiting to happen. You know, things are happening. I'm not saying that nothing is happening, and you're not saying that. It's just that we need to strengthen these bonds. There are a lot of investment opportunities. I know just recently in Ghana, maybe a few days ago, there was an investment symposium for the diaspora, etc. So these things that are happening, and they will become more and more frequent. So long as the diaspora knows that there is a warm, shall we say, environment for their investment, and the investment itself has to be de-risked to the extent that, you know, obviously you can't guarantee, you know, that you're going to make X profit or whatever it is. But the government itself, you know, has to de-risk the investment the way they do for, you know, Western investment, shall we say, in terms of certain guarantees of relative to capital, etc. You know, again, it's a process. It has been happening more since 2019, shall we say, the year of return, and every year I see more of this happening, and we just have to keep on doing it, because, you know, we cannot, you know, maximize the resources on the continent without the full participation of the diaspora. And we need that in terms of investment, yes, but also in terms of trade and commerce with the diaspora. Because as we know, all the diaspora is not going back to Africa either to live or to invest, but they will buy products, etc., from the continent itself, even preferentially, because of their connections. So it's a process, it's happening, but not deep enough or often enough.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Doctor. While we're also coming up with some more questions, please allow me to also introduce another one of our honorable speakers, Honorable Cuthbert Nkubi. Honorable Cuthbert Nkubi is the Executive Chairman of the African Tourism Board. As I mentioned earlier, the African Tourism Board is an agency that promotes and develops tourism with a view to contributing to economic development, international understanding, peace, prosperity, universal respect for and observance of human rights, and fundamental freedoms for all without distinction and without any form of discrimination. The goal is to promote Africa as one destination. Honorable Nkubi is also a regional vice chair affiliate and board member of the UNWTO, and elected as a board member of the United Nations World Tourism Organization, as well as regional vice president. Honorable Nkubi, could you kindly chime in, and we'd love to hear from you also with regards to this very important topic and this wonderful keynote speaker we have today.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's good to see you. And Doctor, what a powerful submission. As the African Tourism Board, I love and allude with yourself to say, God made us and who we are, and proudly as such. And by the way, we are not an afterthought on God's plan of creation. But he took his time and created intelligent human beings like me and you. So therefore, it is necessary indeed to change the mindset. We need a total mind liberation from the shackles of colonization mentality. I totally agree as well that, yes, great leaders we have gone before us who refused to be captured by the system of colonization, and those who stood, by the way, for the right principles were shamefully eliminated. What we need as Africa is a unity of purpose to stand together towards an objective, to say, how do we start appreciating who we are? How do we start to shift away in living under the shadow of our colonizers? There is power in Africa. And in my closing remarks, I will actually share some of the fundamental issues that we need to stand as Africans in Africa. And by the way, when we talk about Africa, we are not talking of black, we are talking of black and white. Whites, those who have embedded their objectives towards unity in developing our systems in Africa. The power that we have, Doc, you are in diaspora. You have contributed so much. I was looking at the statistics, especially our doctors in the United States. They compose a higher percentage. That on itself should tell us that there is power in us. If that power could be channeled towards the right direction, this continent, that is why the colonizers, they will never let go. They will fight from all angles to make sure that Africa stays within the backdrop of the economies of the world, because they know very well once Africa rises in unity with one objective, it is the next powerhouse of this global community. So therefore, my brothers in diaspora, please, we need you. If there was a time where we need to come together, if there was a time where we need to join our resolves and collaborations, it is now. We need you back home. There are so many opportunities in terms of investment in Africa. Let us build the Africa we want to see so that we leave a good legacy to the next generation and generations to come. Thank you once again, my brother, Honorable Kenny, to have brought us together, to have brought these intelligent human beings to say, please, it is time for the spear to rise and sharpen one another. We are on a war. We are not going to apologize. We want to see a better Africa for our generations and our generations to come. Thank you so much, Doc. We really appreciate, we adore your intelligence, we adore your experience. Let's make it happen for our young people in Africa. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Wow, so inspirable, so inspirational. I think really this has been an amazing session, and I think we're very motivated now. I think this is really what we need, is constant reminders to realize, the vast potential that we have. We have someone raise their hand, Practice Educational Services. Okay. Do you have a question?
Yes. Good afternoon from South Africa. This is Dr. Obilano, the CEO of Practice Educational Services and the CEO of Africa Renaissance for Development. I'm based here in South Africa. We are the convener of Practice Educational Conference on the transformation of education in Africa towards globalization. However, I want to make some contribution and as well going to pose some questions to our main speaker. The first thing is this: I want to change my paradigm and my way of thinking from colonizations. Our forefathers have been talking about colonizations. Our generation have been talking about colonization. Are we going to also pass it to our children and continue to talk of colonization, the effects of colonization in Africa every day, year by year? You know, it needs to change. Yes, it is true that Africans in diasporas have done a lot of things, they've done great things all over the world. One, our brothers and sisters that are in diasporas. Now, how do we bring them back to Africa to contribute to the development of Africa? How do we bring them back? How do we sell Africa to them? How do they know the beauty in Africa? How do they contribute? How are we going to bring them back to Africa to contribute to Africa? I've been around the world, but I decide that I'm not going to leave Africa. I'm going to stay in Africa. I'm going to contribute to the development of Africa as an African child. That is one. Number two, how do we use our media to promote the culture and the education in Africa? Our media, yes, our children, perhaps, many of them, you know, they are very close to CNN, BBC, and so on and so forth. I just said that. But what are they saying about Africa? What are the presentations that our children are learning from there? So how do we use our own media, our own culture in Africa to promote and to showcase Africa? That is number one, sir. Then number two, which I want to talk about. Last year, we had our conference. The theme of our conference was the Pro-Africa Educational Curriculum for Sustainable and Inclusive Growth. It is very important. It is very important that we have to, I don't know, subject to correction, that we have to, in one of the ways, that we have to introduce, indigenous knowledge system. Don't forget, before we talk about the colonizers and whatsoever what they have done to our forefathers and so on and so forth, there are existing knowledge that our forefathers had. It was loaded away through westernization, through their own culture. How do we bring our own culture through education? By reintroducing knowledge, our indigenous knowledge system to showcase Africa. So these are the questions that I just want to post and my little contribution. Thank you very much.
That was really, really also very enlightening. And Dr. Garvey, would you like to respond? Or?
Well, yes, you know, he's making statements from his perspective, which is very understandable in terms of impatience, etc. And, you know, emphasizing the fact that a lot needs to be done. You know, if you look, for example, at the African Tourism Board, you know, that's clearly an effort to increase tourism within Africa and also with the diaspora coming to Africa and Africans going to the diaspora. I think you need a similar body in terms of economic development on the continent, as well as in terms of the diaspora involvement and investment in the continent. You know, again, it has to be institutionalized. I talked about institutionalization. So that is something that has to be done along the lines of the African Tourism Board. We need an African Economic Board, whatever you want to call it, that is specifically, you know, looking at economic development in the continent and with the diaspora, and seeks the investment opportunities in the diaspora, as well as in the continent. Because again, we get back to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. It has to be something that's continent-wide, and it has to be centralized somewhere with an authority that is developing the different relationships in terms of a unified concept of how to go forward to maximize the enormous potential that we have based on our resources. So again, it's institutionalization of the things that we need. Again, as far as the education is concerned, I see the gentleman is part of educational services. What's needed is to change the curriculum. We talked about indigenous knowledge. Yes, I hope he's creating curriculums relative to indigenous knowledge. As you know, this is one of our problems, that our history hasn't just been marginalized, but it has been distorted. As if to say civilization started with the Greeks. That's a joke. Civilization started, 5,000 years before the Greeks were civilized, and we civilized the Greeks. So those are the type of not just misunderstanding, but deliberate distortions, of the so-called Aryan model, as opposed to the ancient model, which is the correct model, based on, say Herodotus and other historians who saw our history as the way it was at the time. The other thing is that we need our own platforms. In order to tell our own story, we can't tell it through CNN, and we can't tell it through the BBC. We need to have our own, African media platforms, Africa diaspora media platforms, the ability to communicate, telecommunications between the continent and the diaspora, both in terms of the Caribbean and Latin America, as well as North America. So those are things that have to happen, and we can point them out here, but they need a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, that's true. So we have Praise at your Delhi. I believe you had your hand up first. We have a question you'd like to ask?
Yeah, good afternoon once again, everyone. It's not a question. I'm just going to give a little commendation to the organizers of this meeting, and why I said this is very, very important. Many times when I hear people talk about colonization of Africa and all of that, I usually smile because if you look at history, you would say that it was Africa that first colonized the world. And I know that this will be a question for many of our researchers to go back. Of course, it's something we all know, to find out this. But I think the problem we have had over the decades, over the centuries, has been a refusal to remove that colonial mentality from ourselves. And I know that much of the effort we need to do is sensitization and promotion of unity among the African community. Like I said, it's just a commendation to thank the organizers of this. It's been an insightful one. And I want to say thank you to all the people who have spoken earlier. Kudos, Honorable Kenny, everybody who have spoken, Honorable Garvey, and everybody. I want to say thank you for bringing this. We want more of this from time to time. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Cuthbert Nkubi, you had a comment or question? Sorry, you're on mute.
Oh, yes. No, thank you so much. That's technology working on my way. I want to agree with Dr. Marcus. Colleagues, in order for us to progress as individuals, as member states, and as a continent as a whole, we need to identify who we are. We haven't reached that stage. Yesteryear will always determine our future developments. We need to look at the history. We need to look at yesterday and see the mistakes that were done by our forefathers. Dr. Prakis, yes, we have had quite a lot of discussions, especially in respect of our educational systems. Education syllabuses in Africa are not designed for Africans. They are designed to keep us as underdogs, and it cannot be business as usual. That's why it necessitates to say, how do we undo that was done to this continent? So it is high time for Africa to stand up. I know that when we talk about these colonizations and so forth, we get annoyed to say by this time we shouldn't be talking about colonization. We should be talking about progress. You can only develop, you can only move from the position you are in now when you recognize and start to appreciate the mistakes that we are living on now. So we need to make sure that we change the mentality, we change the system. I have always said great leaders who have gone before us with beautiful agendas. When you look at the UN, Organization of the African Union, our forefathers who developed, came up with systems, your Nkrumah Krame, your Julius Nyerere, structured to say, Africa, can we stand? Can we unite? And by the way, these are the same discussions that are being discussed at the African Union now. Does it make sense? We need to start to implement mechanisms that will change the direction of this continent. So we cannot shun away from the reality on the ground. Doc has indicated the narrative that has been, sprayed along. Just a few weeks ago, we were in South Sudan. And by the way, we were able to walk during the night. It's one of the peaceful countries. But when you go to Google now and Google South Sudan, what you see there, it's scary. It scares any tourist or any investor who wants to invest in that direction. And these are the realities on the ground. Colonized, we have been, and we are still going to be colonized until we say enough is enough and fight the systems. And unfortunately, most of our leaders across member states, they have been captured. They have been captured by the Western, superpowers. They cannot do anything with all what Africa has in terms of mineral richness. It is a shame. So therefore, these conversations, they are so much necessary, and we need more of our young people to be involved so that they take their stand and start fighting the system and start fighting for that is right for this beautiful continent of ours. Thank you so much, Doc.
Thank you so much, Honorable. That was really also very inspirational. And if you allow me, sorry, before we go to the next question, I just want to applaud South Africa for its positions. Honestly, I think it's amazing, again, because we're talking about, the whole world order and how we as different various African countries fit in. Regardless of how you feel, of course, and what's happening in the region, I still say that what South Africa did is quite brave, and it gave me a source of pride. And as a result, at that moment, I felt South African. So I just want to say that. Thank you so much. So we have a question from Anago Osho. You've raised your hand. Do you have a comment or a question? Anago Osho, I see you have your hand up. Just ask you to unmute.
It's a privilege for me to be here, and I give a thumbs up to all the speakers. I am Anago Osho. I'm the founder of Global Anago Adventures. I am co-founder of Association of History, Nature and Culture Tour Guide, Nigeria. I'm co-founder of Association of Professional Tourism Practitioners of Badagry, also in Nigeria. I am ambassador for DNA Tested Africans. I've taught thousands of Africa diaspora. I've been able to change their mindset about Africa. You see, when we talk about Africa, when we talk about Africa diaspora, we need to understand that the primary thing, what we really need is education of self. Education of self. This is very, very important to every one of us, especially young people on the continent of Africa and on the continent of Africa diaspora. I have met thousands of Africa diaspora. I've met young people. I don't know about your country, but it's unfortunate that in Nigeria, they don't teach history anymore in schools. What do you expect from a generation of people who don't have knowledge of self? Some years back, certain things happened in South Africa, which was very, I was crying, I shed tears. They call it xenophobia. Now, most of the people that carried that out were actually young people. But you see, those people that they were against their countries were actually part of those that supported, that fought for the freedom, that fought against apartheid in that country. No matter what we discuss today, it is important for us to teach our young people who they are. History must be taught in schools. If history is being taught in school, I don't think in South Africa, for instance, young people over there will be killing other people of other countries in Africa. And when you look at it critically, you see that these people that are being killed, their countries actually supported their freedom. But you see, there's no knowledge of self, there's no knowledge of past. If there's no knowledge of past, how will there be a present? We are talking about partnership between Africa and Africa diaspora. A lot of Africa diaspora come to Africa, and of course, a lot of them are also interested in the development of Africa. But we need to educate ourselves. Who are these people that are called Africa diaspora? We need to really understand them. We really need to also know that these people that are in diaspora are originally from the continent of Africa, so that we don't see them as strangers. Our children must see them as families. We need to work on all that. No matter how much we love our brothers and sisters in diaspora, we must generalize it. When I say generalize it, I mean everyone in Africa must have knowledge. When I mention, oh, my friend, black person is coming from Barbados. Once such a person comes here, everybody knows that, oh, they are originally from here. So they begin to see them from a different perspective. We need all that. But how do we achieve all that? It is through education of self. The governments of Africa, for example, must critically look into the educational system and develop an African-oriented curriculum so that we teach ourselves who we are, and we teach ourselves who Africa diaspora really are. It is very, very important. And I would also like to mention that African Tourism Board, they are doing very well, but they need to do more. Because someone like me, I've tried to communicate with them. I've been doing that for a while, but we are the ones that are on the field. We are the ones that do the practical works. If we cannot connect with them, then I don't think, I think more needs to be done in that particular aspect. I really appreciate the organizers of this event, and more should come on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We have Dr. Garvey, shall I just read the other questions, or would you like to respond first before I go to the other?
No, I don't know whether you're wrapping down, but we can read the other question.
Okay.
Maybe it's more efficient that way.
Okay, perfect. Mudambo has a question. What are Dr. Garvey's thoughts on the cessation of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso from ECOWAS? What are the potential effect of the trade in the ECOWAS bloc? Okay. And so Dr. Amina, okay. So yes, okay. So you have a comment for one of our brothers. And Praise is saying, Dr. Garvey, what are your views on the post-colonization effects of change in language, culture on Africa? And then we have a couple of people have their hands raised. We have Mufunda Faki, the Taste of Africa, then Prakis and African Tourism Board. So
okay. Maybe we'll go ahead on the business of the.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll go ahead on the business of the coups in Mali, well, certainly in Niger and Burkina Faso, etc. Well, I think that's an indication of the frustration of young people with the situation as it is, and the need for rapid change in terms of decolonization. Because as I'm sure everyone knows, that France has been raping Africa for a very long time, going all the way back to Charles de Gaulle, etc. We know that the war in Algeria, that was devastating to the Algerians when they wanted on their own independence. We know what they did to Sekou Touré when he wanted his own independence. And we know what they've done in terms of the Francophone countries who were bullying into remaining, or shall we say, participating in the ridiculous Francophone Africa, which is simply a situation where France takes the resources of Africa and transports the gold, etc., to France. We saw that with nuclear material. We see that in terms of the CFA, the so-called franc, where France controls the currency of the Francophone countries, and all of their money is deposited really in French banks. And in order to use their money, they have to ask the French for their money, and they have to pay interest. And France invests their money and doesn't tell them what they're investing in or how much profit is made. I mean, it's really prostitution. It's disgusting. And France is a country that talks about liberty, fraternity, and equality. That's a bloody joke. They're darn hypocrites. So, the young people are tired of that kind of exploitation. So, I wholeheartedly agree with the coup. We don't particularly endorse violence, but sometimes to create change, and one has to get to that level, because that may be the only thing that the colonizer or the person who is damaging you understands. And unfortunately, that seems to be the case in Europe. They seem to only understand violence instead of dialogue and reason. And they go to war at the drop of a hat. And you see what they did with Gaddafi, with their propaganda that he was somehow harming his civilians when he had one of the middle economy countries of the world. But the European Union and NATO decided to destroy Gaddafi because he was using his resources to develop Africa, and he wanted to create an African currency based on gold, which he had and African countries have. So these are the problems that we have in terms of developing ourselves, is the continued interference of European and American countries who, have been the enslavers, they have been the colonizers, and they're the near colonizers, and they continue to rape the continent ridiculously. And we see the conditions in DRC. You talked about Sudan, etc. And this is continuing, and they destroy our leaders who stand up for Africa. There have been more than 10 coups in the last 20 years, and destruction of heads of state in Francophone Africa at the instigation of the French. So there's intimidation, there's assassination, and there's continued exploitation. So I'm wholeheartedly in favor of the coups. Now, unfortunately, ECOWAS took the wrong stance in terms of their relationship with the coup leaders, and I think they will regret that. But that shows that they do not have the full understanding of what it means, both on the one hand to be African and then to try to create a continental, united, federated set of states. If they're still with the colonial mentality and want to support France when it is clear that the people in many of the people in the Francophone area want to be liberated from France. So ECOWAS made a mistake, and the rest now is going to be, how do you reconcile those three countries in terms of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali with ECOWAS? That has to be done diplomatically. It will take time, but I do not think, and I do not recommend that the coup leaders bow to ECOWAS, because so far ECOWAS has not shown itself to be truly Pan-African.
Thank you. Wonderful response. So we have many questions. So if we can just keep our questions to maybe like 30 seconds or so, just so everyone will have a chance to ask. Can we start with Mafunda Faki? You've had your hand up. Do you have a question or comment?
Okay, good evening, everybody. I hope I'm audible. Thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you so much for everybody, the organizer of this wonderful event occasion. My name is Mafunda Faki. I am from Zanzibar. I'm currently in Cyprus, and I am the Africa Tourism Board Youth Ambassador and also the founder and managing director of Zanvacay, which is an association that works in empowering youth into economic activities, especially in tourism, blue economy, and entrepreneurship. I'm really glad to be in this meeting today, and what I'm going to give out, I'm not sure if it's a question or comment, but I hope I'll be understood, and maybe it can be also kept in different ways it's going to be. So my point is that I have been listening to this meeting and I've gained a lot of insight and information that most youth will be happy to gain. And as I take it into my position, I can understand that there are so many things that I need to learn every day about our African culture, about our African economic activity, politics, and everything. And if this meeting will be extended to more youth in Africa to understand what is our history and what is our plan, especially development plan, that we are meant to have within the times that are coming in our near future, because we can see the youth are the one who are taking a bigger part into developmental activities. And if we don't get time to learn about these things, to learn from legends who knows better about the history and all these activities, I know that in the near future, youth of Africa will not have this more information. So my position, my suggestion is that we need more of this meeting to more of African youth to attend. And the last one is that teaching our histories. As we can see nowadays, most of the subjects are taught in schools, in universities. Most of people are skipping about this historical subject, and more of them are going into mathematics and STEM and everything. It's very important to our development, especially to science and technologies and globalization. But also, we are not supposed to ignore about our history and our culture, which is we need to learn more about it. So I think with a matter of time, I can stop from here, but I appreciate your work and everything. And I hope to hear more and attend more of this meeting to gain more insight and information. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The Taste of Africa, could we please just keep our questions or comments brief? You have a question?
All right. Yes. Thank you, and greetings, everyone. Yes. Originally, my name is Tango, and I'm from Ghana. I'm the co-founder of the Taste of Africa and Cultural Oneness Festival, an initiative we're working together with the African Tourism Board. And well, mine wouldn't be, I would say, a bit of a contribution and a question at the same time, and just to also keep it a bit brief so that we can get other people also speaking. Yes, well, we are more like an offspring of Dr. Nkumbet. Has, you know, he seeks what he seeks to see is what we are also seeking, you know, to see. But all the conversation, what I've learned so far and what I've heard so far, and I think the problem is really coming from the systems that we are working with, which really have nothing to do with us, and that is our governmental system. And the question, who set those systems? How do we come about those systems? How does those systems help us, you know, in developing? And there's a vibration also going on. Unlike we are speaking of our leaders, our legends, people that fought, you know, for this country to this continent to be the way it is. And where are they in our day-to-day activities or things we do, you know, as an African people? And the other one that I also want to, you know, add on is, you know, what has religion, you know, played in the development of the African people? And I see that religion have demonized us so much that we are failing to realize and to see who we are. I asked the question the last time, and I said, well, not maybe in disrespecting any one religion, but the question I asked, you know, where were Jesus when we were dying, when our ancestors were fighting for us? Where are they in our day-to-day life? You know, whereby when you go, I think it should be a policy. It should be a mandatory, you know, agenda for African people. Like everywhere you go, being it a store or a business center, you should see our legends, their pictures, you know, and a bit story about them, so that it is a shame to us to have a children to grow and they will know Jesus and not know, you know, Nelson Mandela. They will know Jesus first, they will know Muhammad first, and not know Mandela. Because the pictures of Jesus is all around. And the question why that's also disrespect. Even the Jesus they are portraying to us, that might not be the true Jesus. But how can we also portray, even if we don't have the pictures, what can we do to also legendize this our people? Let them be in the minds of the youth. When they grow, they are seeing these images all across, and they are asking questions. Who are these people? What is their life in our life today? What role did they play that get us here? And I think that can also, you know, help us. So these are some of the things I wanted to talk about, and also to say, what can we do to be, you know, not self-centered? As an Africa, we are more of a self-centered people in our local or our, you know, small countries. What can we do to be visible, you know, among ourselves, so the youth can, you know, tap into the resources, so that our resources will be directed to, you know, the Western side, then it will be redefined and sent back to us. Thank you
so much. Appreciate it. Okay, Practice Educational Services, then African Tourism Board. Okay, Practice, could you please unmute yourself? You have a question or comment?
Sorry about that. Thank you. I just want to make a few comments, right? And that'll be all. First and foremost, like I said, and like some of the presenters have also alluded, it is very important that we look at our education curriculum in Africa. If there's anything to be done progressively, our education in Africa, the question is that, does it suit our context or it does not suit our context? That is the first thing we need to look at. Practice Educational Services have been an advocate in the transformation of education in Africa. And that is why we started our International Education Conference on the transformation of education curriculum in Africa. We are working with Pan-African parliaments. As a matter of fact, there are many countries now that have been coming to us for reviewing and transforming the educational curriculum. That is one thing. Then number two, In Africa, we call ourselves Africans. When I see everybody here, I'm very happy that these are my brothers, these are my sisters, we are all blacks, and so on and so forth. But there's something that is cutting us from integrating together. And what is that? The issue of free movement. There's no free movement across the board in Africa. The visas, the borders need to collapse. These have been fighting with the African Union. I've been fighting with Pan-African Parliament, who sit here in mid-rank. Now, what are we doing as individuals, as a group, whereby we'll be able to move around? We'll be able to integrate in terms of our educational curriculum. We'll be able to have a one standardized educational curriculum in Africa, except West Africa, that have one common curriculum, which they call West African examination, whatever. They are in all other parts in Africa. Their educational curriculum are different. So what do we do going forward in that? The same thing with our free movement. I've never seen where a man, because it's against the woman rights, right? If the animals are free to move, the birds are free to move across the board, but the woman being in Africa, we have to close the border. You have to show your passport. You have to show this and this. Now, the African Tourism Board, I've talked to Honorable Kabet Gube. These are the areas that they have to come in. I've also spoken with Pan-African Parliament many times. I've been there. In African Union, I've been there to say, we can't talk about even the free trade. We are talking about free trade. Listen to me. If we did not abolish the borders, the free trade initiative or whatsoever already died before its arrival, because the goods cannot move without people. That is it. And when you are moving with people, you also exchange your culture, you exchange your traditions. One of the speakers was talking about the changing the curriculum in South Africa because of xenophobia thing that happened and so on and so forth. Not only in South Africa, in the whole Africa, because the curriculum does not suit our context. Listen, the issue of xenophobia, I'm a Nigerian, but I'm based here in South Africa. My companies are here in South Africa, right? What happened with the issue of xenophobia, it goes beyond something we can discuss here. So lastly, I want to say, the issue of history is very important. I discussed with Nigerian government, Lagos state government have introduced history to their curriculum. This is one of the things that we are saying. Let African Tourism Board, let the tourism also try as much as possible when they bring people from the Westerns and so on and so forth to come and see our beauty. They must also have something to present to them, not that they will go back and change our history. It's to be, the tourism should not be for monetary value and so on. Let it contribute to our culture, let it contribute to our values, let it contribute to us as Africa. Thank you.
So much, appreciate it. Okay, please, guys, we need to just keep it brief because we're gonna be winding up. I want to get to everybody's questions. African Tourism Board, kindly unmute yourself. African Tourism Board.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Nancy, the Master of Ceremony. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hiwati Amberber, and I'm the Secretary General for African Tourism Board. I own a company called Typical Ethiopia Mice Tourism that's based in Addis Ababa. It just gave me a little bit of thoughts that to speak now, because it's always that my question and my issue in my mind, because I studied my master's in history and heritage management from Addis Ababa University, and had a chance of thoughts for 5 years history for the high school. So I always got crossed my mind with such a shortage of that history written by Africans. It was always my problem that when I'm just facing even to teach that the victory of the Africans towards their win against the colonization, and also that's such a victorious and a proud history that we had. It was all written by Europeans or Westerners. That was always my question. Why? Was that really the exact and what we have done as history, or that was at some shift, at some point, at some extent is just matched by them? It's always in favor of anyone who is writing that history is just deceit. So what is that African scholars in education arena works for the generation? Because we are all so doomed like to think about anything else but not thinking for the coming generation, having the African sentiment, having that the African pride in their own nationality.
Hello, Honorable.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My apologies for my connectivity issue, and I'm just not going to make it short because it is always my question. Like I was struggling to the hardest, even when I'm just a teacher for this history. I was always having a crisis with my students. Like references are all coming from writers, that is from Europeans or Westerners, outsiders. None of that the valuable historical books that are efficiently written by Africans were not available into the curriculum. So what is that we have done, and what is that what we should do and plan for the coming generation, for the next generation, if we really wanted to keep the Africanism sentiment towards the coming generation, to invade in their mind, not to see outside, not to just run out of their own nation. So this is always my question, like, what is that our scholars, what is that, we are not living forever. We just left our legacy behind. So what is that we should do for the coming generation towards this education? Because education is the basement for any excellency. So yeah, I'm just so touched by this question and by this topic. So Dr. Thank you for being here today for us. So I just wanted to ask that, what is that your generation legacy to the coming generation should be with? How is that far that we are supporting and sponsoring the education initiatives, and so by supporting the book to be written for Africa by Africans.
Thank you, Honorable. Thank you. So our next question is Dr. Juliana Kisimbi. Dr. Juliana, could you kindly?
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm unmuted. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Juliana Mumo Kisimbi from Nairobi, Kenya. I am an African Union, European Union, UNDP, AU ECOSOC, and UMA IGAD expert. I'm currently the Sub-Saharan coordinator for the Association of Political Science, and I'm happy to be part of the African Tourism Board. I've got vast experience in the private and public sector for about 10 years in the private sector, including the tourism sector, and 14 years in governance, bilateral, multilateral, and tripartite relations in diplomacy and governance. My question is then, how do you seek to retain your brain in Africa when there are no opportunities? And we have a serious problem of brain drain because lack of opportunities. We have highly educated Africans, especially, from all over Africa, but they cannot stay here they don't have opportunities, neither do they have access to finance because they don't have collaterals. So how do you address that problem so that we can have them invest in Africa? My comment then here would be that I had the question and the concern of free movement of persons and labor. I was in an AU ECOSOC meeting last week, and we discussed and found that and established that only 4 countries have ratified that protocol. So I think it will be one of the main agendas for the Africa Tourism Board to push for free movement of persons, abolition of visas across our borders, of course, with controls, and ensuring that we also embrace e-tourism, because the world has moved from from the manual to digital age. So we have to work with the time, and we also have to look at opportunities that the African Continental Free Trade Area presents for tourism in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, in the continent. We need to actually move with the times, and I believe that ensuring that we portray Africa and placing it where it is will get us to achieve our objective. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shumbi's, would you like to, Shumbi, would you like to ask a question or make a comment? And then we have our last question, Felix Donflexi after Shumbi.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm just trying to see if I can unmute my video here. All right. First and foremost, I just want to respect the people that is on this platform. Dr. Marcus, Dr. Amina Ali, Dr. Kasimbi, Honorable Kenny, and Honorable Betnove, my mentor. So my question, I think partly Dr. Kasimbi asked it. Social media is affecting the way we see Africa, and it leads to brain drain. So we are what we see and what we hear. So what are we gonna do in regards of that? Because most of the time, like Dr. Kasimbi was saying, we must adapt to technology, and we are being portrayed that Africa is a poor country. It doesn't have anything on social media. What steps are we taking in regards of that, and how best can you help us in regards of that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have, I'll give the last question, Felix Donflexi, and then we'll have our closing. We'll have Dr. Garvey, of course, respond, and then we'll have our closings. Okay. Okay, so then I don't know what happened. So Dr. Garvey, would you like to respond and reflect on the different comments that you've received and also questions?
Okay, well, I think it's time for me to leave. I don't know what your time frame is, but it's past what I expected in terms of dialogue. I think, for the morning so far, all the discussions really relate to the fact that we need an educational process to change our mindset. We've been miseducated, and structurally, the curriculums that the colonizers put in place have not been changed over time. Certainly not changed enough radically in order to reflect who we are as an African people, our history, and our culture. So that we're still not educating ourselves to who we are. And of course, self-knowledge is the most important knowledge, as one of the young people who was commenting before said. We need knowledge of ourselves. And knowledge of ourselves is critical then for us to be creative in terms of solving our own problems. So education is a must, and it needs to be transformed so that it reflects who we are, and we all end up with a truly African mind. And the other thing is the whole business of media and communication, social media, newspapers, communication. How do we communicate with each other? We need to be able to tell ourselves who we are. As it is, we have to tell ourselves through different other media platforms that are not ours. So that you know, when we have these modern information materials, our computers, our cell phones, the TV, etc., all we are seeing are messages that are being created by the colonizers and the people who are continuing their colonialism. That is what is delaying our transformation as a people. We keep getting the wrong messages. We need to get our own messages that reinforce who we are and what we have to do, and that therefore will help us to unite. It would give us knowledge of each other in terms of the 54 countries in Africa. It would give us knowledge of CARICOM, the 15 countries in the Caribbean. So we need an African telecommunications media that reaches out to the diaspora. So we are intimately aware on a day-to-day basis of what is happening across the continent to other Africans and what is happening in the diaspora to Africans in the diaspora. So there's a lot of work to be done. I'm very happy to have participated in this dialogue, and I look forward to other such meetings. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garvey. It's an honor to have you. I think we can all agree that it's okay for us to be unapologetically proud of our heritage as Africans and to put the interests of our continent first. So now we're going to our closing. I would like to give one last opportunity to Mr. Don Flexi, if you have a quick comment or question, and then we will have Honorable Cuthbert Nkubi to give the closing remarks. Okay, Mr. Don Flexi. Okay, I think you're still probably muted. Okay, so I would then ask now, if possible, for Honorable Cuthbert Nkubi, to the Executive Chairman of the African Tourism Board, to give our closing remarks.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. So I just want to say a very big thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor. I'm really honored that in my lifetime, I got to hear from you. Thank you so much, everybody else. Just to wrap this up, we have the theme of the summit, the upcoming summit in May, the repurposing of the global cultural developmental agenda of Africa. So, Doctor, I just wanted you to reinforce what models, what system that we need to put in place so that after the summit, after we've gotten 2,000 plus youths come to Abuja in Nigeria, for 5 days. After all of that has happened, what models can we use to actually extend whatever we are going to be discussing for those 5 days? That's exactly what I wanted to talk about. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Honorable Cuthbert Nkubi, Executive Chairman of the African Tourism Board, we'd love to hear from you on our closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Dr. Marcus, thank you for your insights. These guys, they sat down and said, we have received so much noise in Africa. Let's give them their independence. Let's keep the keys to the vault of the economies of this great nation. And furthermore, let's affirm and make sure that we keep them segmented. We keep them separated so that the power of unity will never be achieved in Africa. That is why our great leaders who stood and rose for the emancipation of our economies in Africa, they were brutally assassinated. I think this generation, let me go back, Doc. Down the line centuries, Nebuchadnezzar ordered the names of their captures to be changed. Daniel his name was changed to Belshazzar. Hananiah was changed to Shadrach. Mishael was changed to Meshach. Azariah was changed to Abednego. What was the motive of changing? It was to embrace their identity, to overrule their culture and take their identity away, affirming their integration to the systems of the Babylonians. Give them new names. Give them a new religion. Take their identity away. When the missionaries came to Africa, they used the same model of operando. They gave us new names in Africa. They gave us new cultures, and they gave us new religion. And that affirmed that Africa should not be united, because under unity there is so much power. 1980s, 1780s, if I may, was the peak time of the transatlantic slave trade reaching its optimal. On average, 78,000 of our forefathers, they were brought to the Americas each year for those decades. Same operando as well, applied, changing their names, changing their identities, even changing their diet as Africans. And today, Africa, in the eyes of the global world, is still perceived to be an underdog, battling with disease, battling with corruption, still in the trenches of survival for civilization. May I categorically state that this continent, it is God's showcase of authority and creative power in his creation. Can I shock you in a glimpse of Africa's golden potential? Algeria has about 174 metric tons of gold reserves as we are talking now. South Africa has about 125 metric tons. Libya has about 80.73 metric tons. The list goes on and on and on. Please let us visit our continent, the beauties. That's why I am saying Africa, it's God's showcasing to the world that he is a divine creator. The majestic Victoria Falls, Mount Kilimanjaro, the Table Mountain, Zanzibar, the archipelago, a tropical paradise of the coast of Tanzania, the mountain gorillas of Rwanda, the pyramids of Gaza in Egypt, Mount Mulanje, the list also goes on and on and on. So, colleagues, the wonders of the Nile River, whose basin spans from across Egypt, Sudan, South Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Kenya, DRC, Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, and Tanzania. I'm talking about Africa we have. Dear friends, the outflow of African educated physicians, my doctor here testifies brainchild of Africa. When you look at the United States, there was an increase of over 27.1% of our brothers and sisters who are sacrificing their lives. So therefore, if you tell me that Africa, nothing good comes from Africa, then you are living under a shadow of a dream. I want to urge all of us here, especially our young, vibrant brothers and sisters, to take your position. Take your position and play your role and seize the opportunities in our motherland. Let us not underestimate what we are. Let us not underestimate what we can do, our contributions. My plea to our brothers and sisters in diaspora, it is time. If there was a time where we should stand and come back home, I appreciate the government of Ghana who stood up and opened a corridor to say, come back home. I want to make a passionate plea. In these deliberations, Africa is open for business, and we will do whatever it takes to make sure that we enable every state government to open up corridors for us, for investment. Come and visit. Come and join us. Help us to build. It's not our leaders who is going to do that. It is us within the private sector to say, enough, it's enough. Let us take a front role in driving the changes of Africa, in writing, to write the good narrative about our good continent, Africa, our motherland. We are calling upon all of us. Brother Honorable Kenny, thank you so much. If there was a time to go crazy, if there was a time not to even apologize, to stand on the rooftop and shout as loud as we can, we know that through our endeavors, most of the member states, they are now easing the visa issues, which is a milestone. But we need more. We need to break this divide that has separated us as brothers and sisters. We need to undo these colonized minds. When we look and see our own brother, we are seeing an enemy. That's a barbaric mentality. We need to educate ourselves, our young ones, to start to appreciate the intra-Africa trade that has been implemented. Is to say, how best can we move within Africa? How best can we trade within Africa in the course of developing our destinations? Colleagues, nobody can do it for us. No one can do it for you. But us here, if we stand together and start walking the journey towards a better future for this beautiful continent, it has so much to offer. Once again, we appreciate Honorable Nancy. What a discussion. But let's walk the talk. Let's walk the talk. Let's walk the talk. Let's make things happen. African Union, they are willing to lend an ear. African Union are saying, private sector, come. Let's join hands together. Let's build, let's implement some of the Agenda 63s that by now we should be celebrating, but we are still begging for member states to start implementing those. So it is, the onus is up to you and the onus is up to me. I pledge to stand without any apology. I prepared to lay down my life and make sure that Africa gets what it deserves. Thank you once again. We really appreciate. May God, who sees the deepest of our hearts, be the one who give us the wisdom and the will to stand together and fight together. Let's make it happen. It is your time. It is our time. Let's go for it. Let's do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Honorable. That was really wonderful, very inspirational. Honorable Nkubi, Honorable Kenny, Dr. Garvey, thank you so much for making this a discussion and this session such an amazing session. We definitely, I think the feedback was we need a lot more of these. I think in discussing and this dialogue that we're having, we come up with motivation, number one, and then a lot of solutions also. I'd like to just remind everyone about the African Youth Leadership and Culture Summit, AYLCUS 2024, which is going to be the 21st to the 25th of May, 2024 in Abuja. So we hope that everyone will participate in that. And of course, for more information, of course, you have the team and you have Honorable Kenny can provide that information. And thanks again. Thank you so much for having such an important session. And we look forward to seeing everyone very soon. Thank you.